A Gulfport jury finding 2 men guilty of first-degree murder and armed robbery on the 4th day of the trial. The verdict against Erick Hunt and Richard Norman coming in late Friday night just before 11 o'clock. Noah Noble has been closely following this trial all week and was inside the courtroom when the verdicts were read.
Jurors deliberated for 5.5 hours, deciding whether or not Erick Hunt and Richard Draco Norman are guilty of capital murder and armed robbery. Around 10:45 Friday night, the defendants and lawyers were called back into the courtroom.
Has the jury reached a verdict on each count as to Mr. Hunt?
Yes, sir.
And has the jury reached a verdict on each count as to Mr. Norman?
Yes, sir.
Jury members found both Hunt and Norman guilty of a lesser charge, first-degree murder, and guilty of armed robbery. They also found Norman guilty of felon in possession of a handgun. More than 12 hours earlier, jury members started the 4th day of this capital murder trial with Erick Hunt testifying in his own defense. The Jackson, Mississippi resident said he came down to Gulfport to bond out his friend, and that's when he met up with Richard Norman and Eric Chopin.
Do you regret coming down here that day?
Yes, sir. If I didn't have to, I wouldn't have.
Hunt says he drove Norman and Chopin in his Dodge Challenger to meet the victims, Anthony Otis and Garrett White, and the plan was to sell them weed.
Was there any discussions of robbing anyone?
No, sir.
Otis and White met the 3 defendants in the driveway of a home at the corner of C Avenue and 31st Street in Gulfport. Hunt says Norman got out of the passenger seat of the Challenger and White got inside, but something was off. Hunt told the jury White suddenly got out of the car and Eric Chopin chased him with a handgun. Hunt then grabbed his own gun, a Glock 43X, and when he got out of the Challenger, he saw Norman and Otis fighting over a gun inside Otis's car.
When I made it to the the driver window, I continued to ask them to put the gun down several times.
What was your state of mind at this point?
I was in fear of my life because I didn't know what was going on and why they was fighting over a firearm.
Both Erick Hunt and Eric Chopin testified that the gun Otis and Norman were fighting over went off. Hunt says that's when he made a split-second decision in what he called self-defense.
I shot Mr. Otis because I was in fear that I was trying to protect myself and Mr. Norman from getting shot.
Anthony Otis was hit by that bullet, managed to drive up C Avenue, then crashed into a utility pole where he died. During cross-examination, prosecutors drilled Hunt about his original interrogation with police back in July 2022, about a month after the crime.
When they confronted you with the evidence about your car being at Murphy's and your car being on the LPRs, you told them what? I let them borrow the car.
At that moment, I didn't think that it was important, but as I see today, it's really important.
Mr. Hunt, you shot and killed a man, and you're telling this jury that you don't think it's important for them to know that?
Ultimately, jury members decided that what Erick Hunt and Richard Norman did that day did not qualify as capital murder, but rather first-degree murder. Sentencing is set for next Thursday, where Judge Lisa Dodson will decide their fate. In Gulfport, I'm Noah Noble for WLOX News Now.
The 3rd defendant, Eric Chopin, took a plea from prosecutors admitting he's guilty of manslaughter and armed robbery.